Hi, this is Sam Moore with Blogspot Radio, and I have as a guest today Dédalo, a seasoned archaeologist who is expert in many fields within archaeology, such as the Egyptian pyramid.
Right. Yeah, depending on which people you talk to, which experts you discuss things with, they'll have lots of different theories on what the Nephilim actually were, who they were, where they came from. There's so many different viewpoints on the subject, but we'll try to cover as many as we can today.
Well, the Nephilim, as far as I understand, are products of fallen angels and beautiful humans. I read the Book of Enoch, as well as about 12 different sections of the Bible which reference Enoch. And what the Book of Enoch says is that there were 200 angels up in heaven who looked down on human female with lust and decided to come down and somehow incarnate themselves in human form and have sex with these human females and create hybrid demigod giants. And they called those Nephilim. Goliath of David and Goliath was one. Goliath, who was killed by David with a stone. And the Book of Enoch goes on to say that these Nephilim creatures, I guess you'd call them, because they weren't human and they weren't angels, they were like monsters basically, started devouring men. And God decided that they had to be done away with and buried deep in the earth. And at the very end of the Book of Enoch, it states that the Nephilim indeed will come back at the second coming of the Messiah, which is circa Armageddon. At any rate, my question is, what's the likelihood that the Nephilim actually helped build the pyramids, being that they were somewhere between 15 and 150 feet tall?
Yeah, that's a very interesting. I haven't read the Book of Enoch, but that information is definitely very interesting, considering Genesis touches on the Nephilim. And a lot of people would associate the Nephilim with angels, or from those from which the heavens came, people who came from above. And typically in ancient culture and antiquity, and especially with the Bible, people would associate the up above with heaven. Right. So these people would automatically be associated with being divine, angels from God, rather than maybe extraterrestrials or something from a different galaxy or planet. Now, when it comes to the construction of the pyramids and if they were involved, well, there's many temples all over ancient Egypt and many ancient sites that point to the assistance of the construction of ancient buildings all over South Africa, Northern Africa, up into Europe, and even South America. The stories of the cultures that exist in those areas, and also the belief systems in their own religions, point to ancient visitors who literally taught the people who were there in that time how to use the tools and how to construct these buildings, these architectural marvels, in a manner in which we cannot do today, obviously.
Like the Anunnaki, or...
Yes, the Anunnaki are a wonderful example. They came in and, they looked like us, but they were not us. Obviously, the people in that time noticed that there was something different about these people, about these visitors. And whatever that was, they certainly had an influence on us, whether it was in teaching us different ways or literally altering our genetics.
So it's a general consensus then that the Anunnaki were extraterrestrial beings. Now, is that the same as being a hybrid angel-human demigod, or is that totally different?
Well, it depends on one's school of thought. There's so many different perceptions out there, depending on who you talk to. Gosh, I'm trying to think of the author off the top of my head. I read so much of his literature. I know Eric von Däniken touches on a lot of this stuff. it's Sitchin. I think it's Alexander Sitchin, or I forgot his first name. But to him, the Anunnaki were from what he referred to as a 12th planet, a planet that existed in our solar system, but that took more of an elliptical approach in how it revolved around the sun, and it came into our system, I believe, every 2,000 to 3,000 years, if I remember correctly. The perceptions on who the Anunnaki were and how they came and what they were here for. There's so many different theories. Obviously, some people believe because of the mines that are dated back, 20 to 50,000 years ago in South Africa, that they were coming here to mine for minerals that weren't very prevalent on their planet. And then a lot of people would say, well, gosh, when they got here, they were dealing with a prehistoric man. They were dealing with more of the ape man than the actual human. So that's where the hybrid theories come in, because they were trying to create this workforce. They didn't want to do all of that manual labor in the mines, and that basically they started manipulating genes and creating a hybrid species that wasn't up to their level of intelligence, but was capable of doing the work necessary to fulfill the needs that they needed. So in that time, the workers, the people that were, in theory created by the Anunnaki, did see them as demigods, saw them as a cut above. There was obviously a class delineation between what was considered a regular human being and an Anunnaki or one of the ancient gods.
Do you believe in God? Do you believe God created humans, or do you believe in evolution, or do you have an opinion either way?
On a personal level, considering the way I was nurtured into society, obviously all of us from all over the planet experience different stimuli and different culture and different religion that kind of shapes the way we think. Being a Portuguese American, having a family from Portugal and living most of my life here in America, I do believe in God. I like to sometimes refer to it as the universal mind.
Do you believe that God created everything in the universe, including extraterrestrials? Assuming you believe that extraterrestrials exist, do you think God created them as well?
Yes, I believe that it is highly likely that there is other life somewhere in the solar system. I like the old saying, true wisdom is admitting I know nothing. So I try not to say for sure that I know exactly that that's the case, but I believe that the likelihood of that being so is very high. And for me, and on my spiritual opinion, would be that yes, there was a God, a universal mind that created all of that.
From what I understand, God created the earth in 7 days, but to God, 1 day is as of 1,000 years for God. I'm not sure exactly how far that puts us back on the timeline, but I'm confident that that contradicts the popular theory of evolution, where we evolved from a single cellular organism from a primordial soup into forming a multicellular organism, which somehow developed the ability to create organ systems and a spinal cord and walk and fly and eventually turn into the human. Those two timelines don't correlate well at all, as far as I've been told. What do you think about that theory of evolution versus the theory that God created the earth in 7 days?
Well, I think my personal opinion is that both theories, both ways of thinking, both belief systems have room to work together. Imagine, for instance, God as a gardener, planting seeds all over the universe, planting solar systems and galaxies and planets and species and things of that nature. Now, he plants these seeds and over time cultivates them. I think one of the misconceptions that we have in the world, especially with biblical theory, is that we believe the world has to be in a certain time frame. But the reality of it is, for those who believe that God exists and believes that God has infinite powers, our concept of time and dimensions is really, really quite ignorant, compared to what God, potentially understands.
Because God lives in a world where time is infinite.
Yeah, oh yeah. Time
so
and
time
space
is negligible.
Exactly. Time and space is something that is very infinite. You would imagine when talking in the terms of God. Thus, the potentialities for human evolution over a period of time. Let's say, for example, that God seeded the earth with life, and that life in the beginning was born in the primordial ooze of whatever God created, and over hundreds of millions, if not billion years, it became what it is today. Now, that I think it's still fair to say that could have been God's plan. But again, God is a patient God, and if He's an infinite and universal one that's constantly in a creative mode, creating, as we've seen, with our telescopes now, that there's galaxies, there's solar systems all over the galaxy, that He might have seeded Earth in the Milky Way, and then He started seeding planets all over the place, and He's never stopping. He's constantly working His magic throughout, the galaxy. So,
a popular theory among the ancient alien types is that the aliens came down to Earth and took genes from, say, monkeys and mixed them with their own genes and hence created the human. Mm-hmm. Is there any way to possibly mesh that idea with what is written in our Holy Bible?
Wow, that's a really, really great question. I think that, well, what is written in the Holy Bible? Because you would start talking about Adam and Eve, right? So you would say that the creation of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. Well, I believe it's plausible to share to mix the two together, because what someone may, let's say, for example, someone who doesn't believe in God would say, and they do believe in ancient alien theory, would say this life from another planet or another solar system comes here, sees the life that exists, finds monkeys or gorillas to be a suitable candidate for gene transplantation or manipulation, and then does their work, and voila, you have human beings. In the same context, is it so far-fetched to imagine that God might have planted the seeds of life on Earth, seen the development in the stage in terms of where gorillas and monkeys and primates were existing, maybe even what we would call like Procragnon and the men of the past, and also have said, well, I'm going to give these people a boost, a genetic boost. Is that so far-fetched as well? Or to say that, for those who believe in angels, that God sent His angels to do that work. I think that, is there a for sure answer? I don't think so, but I think it brings a beautiful aspect of, theoretical thought. Our ability to conceptualize and imagine the potentialities that could have existed. And that's why I've always enjoyed talking with people about theology and people in the science realm, because really we're not so different when we really sit down and think about things. We have faith and beliefs in something. The only thing is it's different.
When you talk about aliens and UFOs and UFO sightings and abductions and aliens impregnating human females and dropping them off back in their bedrooms and picking them back up 6 months later to extract the fetus and growing the fetus into a young adolescent hybrid alien human being, and then re-abducting that same woman to introduce her with her offspring that are alien human hybrids, and the woman coming back to Earth and with a perfectly straight face and all the sincerity that I can possibly imagine telling this story. Can that all be in her head? I mean, did she make that whole thing up? And how is this happening thousands and thousands of times in all of the countries all across the world?
That's a really great point that you bring up. Now you start to enter into the realm of the, psychology of a human being. And I think one of the things that's always interested me about the abduction stories, and as you hear them, they actually kind of start to meld together. They're actually quite similar. So a lot of people who study in the field say, gosh, well, look at all these people. They're having the same experiences. They're very similar. Thus, this must be true. And I think it speaks, certainly, in my personal opinion, that is there the potentiality that these people are literally being taken out of their rooms, guided up into a spaceship, and worked on, whether, tested DNA, taking DNA out of them, or being, using that DNA to create another hybrid species or what have you. Is that a potentiality? Yes. But I think if one's going to allow that to be a potential answer, they also have to consider the fact that this person may be actually living out some sort of subconscious thinking, that it could be a dream state, that this person is just intrigued by the idea of not being alone. A lot of us humans deal with the interesting concept of codependency, whether it's in relationships or with loved ones, our partners, family, animals. We don't like the idea of being alone. And so to believe that there is nothing out there, that we are it and this life is it, can be a bit cumbersome for some folks. So I could imagine that they might manifest those realities as well.
One possible explanation I've contemplated is if you look at the phenomenon of spiritual channeling, where a person like, say, Edgar Cayce goes into a trance state and channels a spirit from another dimension. And during that channeling process, he reveals all these truths that are later found to be absolutely true and factual and helpful for people. You've got this human being, their soul or their spirit, essentially stepping aside and letting another soul or spirit come into their body and use it to convey all this information. Another example of this phenomenon, I believe, is schizophrenia, where you have people with all these voices in their head, which I think could be sort of multiple spiritual, possibly mostly demonic spiritual infestation, like sort of a multiple demonic possession phenomena, where these schizophrenics aren't just crazy, but they're actually being possessed by several demons. So what I was thinking is, since there is pretty much no physical evidence of alien abductions and hybrid human-alien offspring, possibly these people are experiencing some sort of demonic event.
You know what? That's a really good point. Far be it from me to generalize. Sometimes when we're talking on certain topics that it might sound like a generalization, and you bring up a good point, the potentialities. Could it be a demonic event? Could it be the perception of being abducted? Could it be some form of psychosis? Just because one may be true doesn't discount the others. So a person who's in a psych ward, being in psychosis, believing that their room is being infiltrated, maybe in the other room down the hall someone's actually being abducted, and maybe down the hall someone's literally dealing with some sort of demonic possession or what have you. So the reality is that there's many dimensions to these potentialities, and we should remain open-minded to those. And it's good that you have that as well in your mind, because yes, the church, whether it's the Catholic Church or cultures throughout the world, believing in demonic possessions and the potentialities that exist within that context, it's palpable for some people. They literally believe that that's what's going on. And who are we to say that that's not the case for sure? Because I just as much as someone might say there's evidence to discount it, I would believe that the true believers would say there's lots of evidence to prove it as well.
Well, thank you, Dédalo. We're going to take a little break, and when we come back, we are going to discuss the Great Awakening, which occurred in 2012 and is occurring as we speak in 2013, and what it means to travel into the fifth dimension.